John Nicolaisen, Winslow Small, and Ken Cookman. And from the Board of Trustees of Alameda County Law Library, Boyd Burnison, getting the door for you. Again, I'm Mark Estes. I've been here, this is into my 4th year now, and I got to tell you, I'm having a really fun time in Alameda County in a public law library. I came from a law firm world, then large law firm in Colorado, Holm, Robertson, Owen, now merged with Brian Cade. So it's been quite a change from Colorado to California. So when I had a chance last November to attend the hearings on California civil justice and first met Jim Brosnahan, I was thoroughly reminded of why I went to law school. His remarks confirmed the 2006 Super Lawyers article headline, "The Man Who Hates Injustice." Now, I've since learned that his passion includes painting and his family. And if you get a chance to see his office, those things will be on vivid display. But without any further ado, I guess we've got a lot of good stories and telling statistics. Thank you and welcome.
Thanks very much. Hello, everybody, distinguished judges, lawyers, members of the public, crisis in the court. I called the governor yesterday and asked him if he could just announce the cuts. It would increase the number of people that would come hear me talk today. We saw on the news, I've known Jerry for a long time, and so that's what he did. I'm going to try to cover 3 things for you today. 1 is where I think we are. 2 is how I think we got there. And 3, some solutions to where we are. And although I may become adamant, since the cuts in the courts are cutting what I personally love so much, the worst day in the trial is better than the best day in the office. That is, I learned that years ago. And so, I'm just addicted to the thing. Give me a witness, cross-examine, I don't care, who is it? And they want to cut that, somebody, And so we won't name any names because they're too prestigious, but you'll get the idea. Those of you who have come to find out how bad it is, let's take the suspense out of it. It's really, really bad. And as we look up on the screen, we see the picture of Bernie Witkin, who passed away a number of years ago. And he was the extraordinary combination of scholar, perhaps the greatest legal scholar California certainly has produced, and a gentleman who liked to party. And I don't know that that's the same meaning that the kids put on that today. I doubt it, actually. But there could have been some liquor involved. And for 12 years, I've been going down to Fresno and giving the Bernie Witkin lecture. And I talk about U.S. Supreme Court cases of the last year. But when Bernie went down there, then they went up in the mountains afterwards and camped out and drank and so forth and had quite a good time. When he got to be 90 years old, I think there were 90 birthday parties around the state of California for Bernie Witkin. It was like the thing to do that year. And in fact, I suspected that he was 91 or 2. The party just kept going. And you got to come to San Joaquin, and we'd love you down in San Diego. And he reflected the good humor of the state of California and its diversity. He liked to meet people. And this state is amazingly diverse and tumultuous. And as we sit here today, right now, there's a total number of legal needs that are present in this state. And we're going to talk about that. And those needs are somewhat hidden from certainly governmental view, if we mention the governor and the legislature. They happen in ways that don't necessarily leap out at all of us. So Bernie Witkin used to go to Fresno, and they loved him down there. And I start with the annual report given just last year of Judge Gary Huff, the presiding judge of Fresno. They've gone down in employees, not too bad, he says. And that is one of the notes that I want to hit today. In my view, I've never been a judge. I will say that the governor at the time had the good sense to make my wife a judge and not make me a judge. So I think it was probably a deliberate decision to find somebody with what judges do. And but here's Judge Gary Huff, and he said, you know, we're making do with this. And that is one of the great skills of judges. No matter how hard it is, we're going to make it work. We're going to somehow struggle to do whatever needs to be done. So the number of employees in Fresno has gone down from 575 to 520. The traffic court is down 21%. The misdemeanor department is down 12%. I'll come back to that point, the implications to what legislators proudly declare to be their strong point. Law and order are affected by what is happening in the courts. By way of example, our family support and facilitator programs, which are both grant funded, are expected to operate at a $400,000 deficit this fiscal year, mostly due to a decade of not receiving any cost of living increases and so forth. That the quality of justice has been negatively affected by the cuts happily entered into by the legislature and the governor, there can be no question. And I'll give you specifics as we go along. Let me start with a few statistics just to get us going here. Population served by the courts in California, 38 million. I have a news flash. This is the kind of reason that I get invited to places. Some of them get in trouble, all right? Not so much in Berkeley where I live, but I understand in other places they get in trouble. And they have civil needs. And there are small businesses that need a place to go. Most businesses do not go to jams. They cannot afford to go to jams. They cannot pay $6,000, $7,000, $8,000. No knock on jams. It's a perfectly wonderful group. Total court systems filings more than 10 million cases. There's no suggestion by anybody in authority in this state that they're going to be able to reduce the number of legal issues that will flood into the courts. As a matter of fact, in this morning's paper, one of the legislators said that he had introduced a bill that would revoke executive bonuses, and this is out of the PG&E difficulties, if certain things happen, all of which it may be a very good idea. But the question I have is, and I wish somebody would listen, is suppose they don't want to pay it. What good is that statute if there's no place to go and get it enforced? Suppose the courts are closed, and some of them are. Then what? And who is it that will care about this enough to do what I did last week with trepidation, is call my senator's office? I'll come back to that. I may never do that again. California, the nation's largest judicial branch, alone has seen its budget cut by 30% the last 4 years. 30%. That's before Governor Brown's new budget that came out yesterday. Trial courts, 58, 1 in each county. Court of Appeal districts, 6 in 9 locations. Judicial branch budget as percentage of total state budget, 3.1%. So when you hear on the radio that they've got to cut the courts because it's really important, they got to raise the money, it's a very small part. We'll come back to the separation of power, which I checked this morning, still exists in California. Sometimes I watch the news, I have to go check and see that the work of Rousseau and Locke and Montesquieu, who quietly and subtly thought about the advantages of 3 separate departments in government so that one department wouldn't run everything, those people news for Justice Scalia. They were foreigners. And they animated the thinking of the founders in this country in different ways and led to the debates and the creation of 3 departments. In fact, sensing that this may be a friendly crowd to what I'm going to say today, we think this way in Berkeley sometimes. What is the justification for government? Oh my, we brought a Berkeley person. There he goes on the socialist thing, you know. Oh my God. No, I'm just a very conventional idea. One of the justifications, one at the top, is to have an objective place where people who cannot agree on something, whatever it is, go there and get it decided and accept it as final at some point, subject to appeal. That is one of the main justifications for government. That is what was cut into yesterday. That is what is cut into the last 4 years. So, courts have closed entire court branches, including Butte, San Joaquin, San Luis Obispo, San Diego, Sonoma, and Stanislaus County. Those are the outlying courts that have been closed. Self-help and family law assistance services have also been reduced or shuttered in courts throughout the state. California judicial budget, as I said, represents less than 3%. There it is, tiny little piece of pie. You got that piece of pie in the restaurant, you wouldn't be unhappy. You wouldn't go there again. Los Angeles, a man successfully fought a wrongful eviction with the help of pro bono lawyers. He died sleeping outside waiting for the order to be processed. That happened. What I find in all the discussions, over all the years actually, is we live in a society that is capable of taking humans and putting them into statistics as part of the scientific method, all of which has produced many great things in this country. I don't want to be understood as being opposed to the scientific method. But as soon as you take a dead person in Los Angeles, because the clerk's office couldn't function, or something like that, you begin to feel what is involved in this issue. And it's pretty important. In San Diego, a woman filed for a restraining order. This is so common in courts. My daughter's a prosecutor of Minnesota. They have the same. They have all the spousal abuse, all of the issues that everybody cares about, all the things that legislators say they care about. All those things come into courts, as they must. A stay-away order. It can be crucial, it can be life-saving. She had an abusive spouse, unable to get a hearing due to budget cuts, and at risk of beatings at home, she slept in her car at the Superior Court. This is the perspective of, like several of you, a number of you, someone who's been appearing in court with clients for 53 years. That is my view. It's just like this. And here's what I say that has built up my reputation. I'm going to share it with you now. Here's what I say very often. Yes, Your Honor. That's what I say. I say that a lot because you have to say that. I mean, that's what you have to say, a lot. So that's my perspective. And here, to my left, is some client with a problem. All kinds of clients. Suppose I couldn't go there. Suppose they were closed. San Mateo County, due to cuts in staff and service hours in the 3-month period from July to September 2011, over 100 women were unable to receive timely restraining orders. 100 women. Where's that in the budget that was announced last night? Where's that? Who's accountable for that? Where do we go? What is the committee in the legislature that will listen to us if we say, you say that you're for women's rights. It's a right not to be abused. Where do we go now? This morning is a little different than 2 days ago almost, and I'm going to get to that for you. In many California counties, child custody cases go unresolved due to a lack of court resources, including vital personnel. Where are the kids going to be? They're going to be with mom, they're going to be with dad, they're going to be with the grandparents. where are they going to be? Would any of us wish that for any kids that we have? No. Business disputes throughout California cannot be resolved as hearing and trial dates are unavailable. Similarly, consumers and victims of fraud cannot get their day in court. It is dramatic that the head of the Chamber of Commerce for the state of California stood on the steps of City Hall 3 weeks ago with the head of the consumers' lawyers in California and said, basically, no more cuts. And no one listened. Clerks' offices closing early, the horror stories about this, you'll immediately realize when someone who has to take a day off because they have to go to the clerk, because they have to do something, file something, pay something, and it closes. Some of the courts close at 2:30. There's one clerk's office that, depending on how much they have from the day before, they cannot open in California. There's no clerk's office. The civil justice crisis. Due to budget cuts, programs funded by Legal Services Corporation anticipate laying off 163 attorneys and 393 employees. The number of nationwide legal services lawyers in the United States in the last 5 years has gone down 40%. California, there are fewer than 800 legal aid attorneys. And we'll come back to John, the philosopher. I don't know if you're listening. Things are not good out there. That's my big point. I want to be clear. Okay? This is a problem. So, what is the related problem? The related problem is one of two pillars of bar activity that I always thought were like central over the last years that the lawyers were turning to and should turn to. Now, one was diversity, let people in, and the other was access to justice, which I noticed when I was prosecuting a first-degree murder case in Arizona in federal court in 1962. If you haven't noticed, I am of mature age. It was a year before Gideon, which announced the right, but in federal court, there had already been a decision. In federal court, in a criminal case, you got a lawyer, and they assigned Mr. Beck, who I considered to be a young associate kid from a law firm in Phoenix, and I thought, that's not right. I think I was 28, he was 26. But that's the way I thought in those days. Like, I'm old and he's not, you know, what can I tell you? So I got a book on counsel. Very few public defenders' offices in the United States at that time. And I became interested in that because I think lawyers and judges are, for the most part, on most days, doing good, important work. And that voice has got to be heard in the state of California right now. And I'll get back to that idea. So here we are, and we have the unrepresented. And I'll briefly remind you or tell you of the following. Nationwide and in California and in Kentucky and Tennessee, because I checked, 6 out of 10 of the people in the middle class who go to court go without a lawyer. 6 out of 10. 6 out of 10. 8 out of 10 below the poverty level go without a lawyer. I have seen them. I have been there. I can be a witness. What is an order to show cause, says the woman in the faded dress that's seen a lot of service. And the judge said, he was polite, and he said, well, it's up in Department 94. She said, but they're closed, and I'm losing my apartment on Monday. It was Friday. Okay? Americans are moved by such stories. I went over to my associate. We were trying a case in the Los Angeles Superior Court. I said, you want a client? I don't know if she thought I was going to give her Oracle or what, but she said, okay. And so she went and talked to her, and we got a continuance. She called up, we said, We have 1,200 lawyers. You know how big firms do the pro bono. We have 1,200 lawyers that are going to stop doing whatever else they're doing, and they're going to make you, the example for all time. And we got a continuance and she could stay in the apartment. But for the fact that we were sitting there, she would be like the thousands of other Californians that wander around. Judges' time is taken up by pro se parties who are unrepresented. The unrelenting attacks on the Legal Services Corporation continue, and I've given you those statistics. There's a case called Lassiter. It's a terrible case with a terrible mother in the United States Supreme Court in 1981. And it holds that a mother who's being deprived of her child has no right to counsel under the Due Process Clause of the United States Constitution. Now, the fact is, because I've read this case a number of times, the facts make the reader think that you wouldn't want to give any child to this mother. I think she had murdered the child's father or something. There were complications, as we say, when we represent people. There were bad circumstances there. There are a few bad facts that probably needed to be admitted and so on. But here's the thing. No right to counsel in civil cases. Reading all the other decisions that have come out over the years, it seems like nobody read Chief Justice Berger concurring opinions this big. He made the fifth vote in Lassiter. And he says, I'm content to join the narrow holding of the court, leaving the appointment of counsel in termination proceedings to be determined by state courts on a case-by-case basis. But if you read the cases in Indiana and these places, they just had no right to counsel. And if you look at the California Supreme Court, you can make a very good case in your head that there is a right here in California for a number of reasons, right to counsel. And perhaps somebody will take one of these cases up there and someday and be able to do something about it. The right to counsel is becoming very active as an issue. And the flooding of the courts is becoming really getting much attention from professors and so forth. There are many studies being done. Again, the problem with studies is they won't be done for 3 or 4 years. So meanwhile, many lawyers are thinking, well, what can be done right now? And I will get to that in a minute. Number 2, how do we get there? Well, society is always on the move. There's a lot of, and this is a game anybody can play. You can think yourself influences that are occurring as we speak. But number 1, for example, the number of oral arguments has probably gone down. And so one, as a lawyer, is in this world where emails are there, and so you don't have to see anybody. If you don't like other humans, then you can stay in your office all day long and produce paper and never have to talk to anybody. And if you're saying something controversial or difficult, you have all the time in the world to answer it. But there are always older partners like myself who want to actually talk about, something. But as a result of that, going to court, and as a result of specialization, I specialize in Zimbabwe debentures, whether I don't need the courts. I just go to Zimbabwe and I come back. That's it. Okay? And I know everything about the International Zimbabwe Debenture Treaty, and that's of great interest to me. So why is this something I should care about? Yes, I'm a lawyer. I owe some responsibility to the courts, I guess, if they're in trouble, but I don't feel it. I don't feel it necessarily. Society is always on the move, and one of the best writers about what law is was John Dewey, who was not a lawyer. He was just a philosopher. Philosophers hang around campuses, walk up and down, thinking and writing. It sounds like fun, actually. And, but to ask the question, what is law, I recommend you not do that, okay, because it's too frightening. It's too frightening. Because right next door to the question, what is law, is what does it all mean? And we know we cannot get through Tuesday if we start asking questions like that. But here's what he said. And I just really like John Dewey. And here's what he said. What is called application of law is not something that happens after a rule or law or statute is laid down. This would be news to the legislature, or they know this not. They think they have dealt with the issue once they have the pronunciamento, the uniform doing away with evil statute. But is a necessary part of them, such a necessary part indeed, that in given cases we can judge what law is as a matter of fact only by telling how it operates and what are its effects in and upon human activities that are going on. I like that definition. I like that. It's existential, it's realist, it's pragmatic, and you have to ask yourself the hard questions. The mother who doesn't get a hearing on whether she can have her child is how well law is functioning in that court. And once you say that, if you're a lawyer, and the judges I know work with these kind of things, once you say that as a lawyer, the burden is very heavy. If it matters, then the application is what counts. So the arguments that you make, how you persuade somebody, all those things become very, very serious. So part of where we are and how we got here is, and I mean no attack on alternate dispute resolution. I may be a salmon in the stream, or maybe a perch, maybe a minnow or a smelt, but I wouldn't try to go up that river in this society and say, well, alternate dispute resolution is the problem. No, I wouldn't say that. I've used it too much myself. But by creating jams, some of the most powerful people in the society do not have the problem. It's like schools, to some extent, which is not a subject before us here today. The disenfranchised people are standing there in line on the 5th floor of the San Francisco Superior Court. I went and looked at them, checked my statistics, and they're in front of the self-help office, which is composed of very devoted people who are trying to do something to help those who are being thrown out of their housing, or whatever it might be. And I looked at them. I didn't talk to anybody. I just stood and watched them. There was a long line. Some of them were fairly well dressed. They had no lawyers. Those are the middle class people now, as it moved up in our society, that do not have any lawyers, and they've got to figure out how to do their pleadings, how to make the argument. And yet, you can't do that in California unless you've been to law school now. That's really where we are. And then to check, they give you an exam to make sure you were listening when you were in law school, and you cannot do it. You cannot represent anybody, but you can represent yourself. And with, let us say, mixed results. Legal education in the courts is interesting. The courts may not, these are all questions, by the way. You're happily present to answer them any way that you want, but legal education has lost some of its focus on courts. For example, the evidence course is no longer required at Harvard, Hastings, or both. A judge on the Ninth Circuit, no names today, but discovered that his 2 clerks had never had evidence. Okay, they're very bright, you know, but they never had evidence. And he said to me confidentially, he said, I wouldn't have hired them if I knew that. Now, lots of law students take evidence because they have an interest in going to courts, and you know what's relevant and what isn't can be somewhat important there. Sometimes not, actually, but whatever. All right. Is this a conformist social period that we're in, where we go to lunch at the library and then by the time we're on the main floor, we figure, well, what can I do? It's hopeless. It's never hopeless. We have a little committee, a cell, you might say, over in the San Francisco bar. We are dedicated to taking steps, taking action. It's liberating. It's like the 60s. I'm reliving my youth. I'm reliving the youth I never had. I mean, what can I tell you? And we're only interested in projects that can be done now to help the problem. This is a hell of an idea, okay? And you would not believe probably well, I don't want to, people are kind of naysaying, well, I don't think nobody will go for that, legislation won't go for it, nobody will go for it. So, all right, so here are some solutions, then we're going to open it up for questions. Questions like, should I leave the country, Brosnahan? I'm trying to have lunch, what is this? Okay. First of all, we're not on anybody's public agenda. Now, we is very broad. Lawyers, judges, the legal society, the third branch of government. We are not on anybody's political agenda. We're not visible. Everybody wants to know what the Supreme Court will do on health care. I have yet to find anybody who says, what's happening? Tell me, Brosnahan, what's happening with the unrepresented? What's happening with the budget? And some of these are lawyers who are making their living there. The implication for everything I've said today for the plaintiffs' lawyers is there will be lawyers that will not make a living. They cannot wait 5 years on a contingent fee. You see how it works. So I had the idea, it was my idea, of having hearings statewide. So it was a cocktail party here, and I had never met the chief. So I went up to the chief. I said, Chief, I need 10 minutes of your time. Now, what you think about a speaker that would do that, I don't know. But I went to her chambers, and I know her executive assistant, which I think helped, and I spoke for 35 minutes. I said there should be statewide hearings on the unrepresented. That was my idea. Let's do it. And she was very excited about